The Zambezi River, with its majestic currents carving through 6 African nations, is a breathtaking natural wonder. But beneath its tranquil surface lurks a deadly predator that even the bravest adventurers fear: the hippopotamus. Meet Paul Templar, a fearless native Zimbabwean and experienced canoe safari guide, who has dedicated his life to showcasing the Zambezi's beauty to thrill-seeking tourists. Despite the constant risk of a violent hippo attack, Paul fearlessly leads his clients through the heart of the wild Zambezi. But one ominous day, as they journeyed downstream, a monstrous hippo struck with ferocity, capsizing their canoe and dragging Paul under the water. What followed was a harrowing struggle for survival against one of Africa's deadliest beasts, an experience that would transform Paul's life forever. Hit the like button and subscribe. It's going to be an exciting ride. On March 9th, 1996, the African sun shone brightly over the majestic Zambezi River, illuminating its rippling currents and casting long shadows over the rugged terrain. Paul Templar, a seasoned canoe safari guide, was leading a group of tourists down a river, pointing out the incredible wildlife that called the river home: towering elephants, sleek lions, graceful giraffes, and deadly crocodiles. But it was the hippos that Paul feared the most. These massive territorial creatures were known to attack without warning, capsizing canoes and dragging their occupants under the water. Despite his fears, Paul pressed on, determined to provide his clients with an unforgettable experience. But on this day, as he set out onto the river, a sense of unease washed over him. A friend who was supposed to lead the tour had fallen ill with malaria, and Paul couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The sky overhead was a hazy shade of gray, and the air was thick with humidity. As they made their way down the river, Paul's anxiety grew. The water was choppy and rough, the wind whipping up whitecaps that crashed against the sides of the canoe. Thunder rumbled off in the distance as the sky became darker, but still, they pushed on. While they were exploring the beauty of the river, they came across a pod of hippos, and Paul couldn't resist getting a closer look. The magnificent creatures were basking in the shallow waters, and Paul pulled up alongside them. The tourists were thrilled to observe the hippos, and they started discussing the animals with Paul. However, as they were admiring the hippos, one of the canoes was suddenly knocked off course by a massive force. Paul's heart skipped a beat as he realized what had happened. A massive bull hippo had charged at the young guide's canoe, and now chaos ensued. The hippo opened its jaws wide and clamped down on Evan's leg, dragging him under the water. The young man's screams echoed through the air, and the tourists were paralyzed with fear. Paul's heart raced as he paddled towards the young guide, Evans, who had been knocked into deeper water by a charging hippo. With panic in his eyes, Evans reached out for help, and Paul moved towards him. But before their fingers could touch, the water exploded and everything went dark. In an instant, Paul found himself deep inside the belly of a giant bull hippo, his legs thrashing around in slimy, slippery darkness. He groped around and finally managed to grab hold of the tusks, using them to push himself out of the hippo's mouth and back to the surface. Gasping for breath, Paul saw that Evans was still struggling to stay afloat. Determined to save him, Paul swam back towards him, but as he moved to grab his hand, he was hit from below. Once again, Paul found himself waist deep in the hippo's throat, the massive creature thrashing him around like a rag doll, but Paul refused to give up. He fought with all his might, and eventually the hippo spat him out again. With his heart pounding and his body aching, Paul started swimming towards safety once more, but he couldn't leave Evans behind. Turning back, he swam towards the young guide once again, determined to get him to safety no matter what. Paul's encounter with the hippo was like a scene straight out of a Hollywood thriller. As he tried to rescue his guide, he found himself face to face with the giant creature, feeling the bristles on its snout and then suddenly finding himself inside its mouth, wedged between its jaws. The hippo's tusks bored through his flesh, but Paul knew he had to hold on to them to prevent further tearing. Despite the terror of the situation, everything seemed to be moving in slow motion for Paul. He could think through each step and make calculated decisions to increase his chances of survival, but the hippo wasn't giving up easily. It took him under the water repeatedly, and Paul held his breath until it finally tired and dived into deep water. As he lay wedged inside the hippo's mouth, Paul wondered if he would bleed to death or drown. The water around him was mingling with his own blood, and the sun's rays created a beautiful green and blue hue around him. The pain was unbearable, and Paul knew he was faced with a decision that could mean the difference between life and death. Should he give up and let himself drift away, or should he summon the strength to fight for survival? In the midst of this harrowing experience, Paul experienced a profound sense of peace. He made the difficult choice to fight on, even though it meant enduring unimaginable pain. His body was wrecked with agony, and he couldn't help but wonder if he made the wrong decision. But just when things seemed dire, fellow guide Mike showed incredible courage and paddled to rescue Paul and his guide. With Mike in the safest kayak, the hippo couldn't reach them, and they were also able to escape the dangerous situation. Apprentice Mike swiftly sprang into action, using whatever resources he had on hand to perform emergency first aid on Paul. However, as the group searched for Evans, their situation grew increasingly dire. It was dark, and with no sign of Evans. Their hopes of rescue were fading fast. Evans was missing and presumed dead. 2 long days passed before his lifeless body was discovered, with no visible injuries. The young guide had drowned, a tragic reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of Africa's wild waters. Paul Templar's harrowing encounter with a hippopotamus left him with 38 major bite wounds, a crushed left arm, and a punctured lung. It took 8 grueling hours to get him to a hospital that had a surgeon skilled enough to attend to his injuries. Despite the surgeon's best efforts, Paul's left arm had to be amputated, leaving him feeling furious and resentful towards the world. However, his life changed when the surgeon told him, "Paul, you are the sum of your choices. You're exactly who, what, and where you choose to be in life." At first, Paul was unimpressed with the statement, as it was easier for him to blame external factors for his misfortunes. But over time, the words sunk in, and he realized that no matter what happens to us, we always have a choice in how we respond to it. This realization led Paul to return to the river where he was attacked, traveling in a canoe with a custom-made single paddle. He even saw the hippo once more, and his scream scared it off, though he never encountered it again. Now retired from full-time safari guiding, Paul spends his time as a motivational speaker, sharing his miraculous story of survival and the lessons he learned from his encounter with the hippo. His story serves as a powerful reminder that we have the power to choose how we respond to challenges that life throws our way, and that even in the face of tragedy, we can find strength and resilience within ourselves.